Hello and welcome. So today, we're going to dive into something pretty fascinating, and honestly, deeply human. We're talking about the psychology of detachment, why our minds sometimes have to check out just to survive.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever been in this situation, maybe it was really stressful or just completely overwhelming, and you got this strange feeling like you were an outside observer, just watching your own life unfold? You know, like you're there, but you're not really there? If that sounds even a little bit familiar, then you've already experienced a version of what we're exploring today.
So how does that even happen? Well, think about it like this. Your brain has a built-in safety feature. It's kind of like an emergency switch. When things get too intense, too painful, or just way too scary, your brain can literally flip this switch to protect you. It's a powerful, almost primal survival mechanism that's hardwired into us.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to look at what this emergency switch really is. We'll define what detachment actually means. We'll get into why the brain does this and what it looks and feels like. Then we'll explore this idea of it being both a shield and a cage. And finally, we'll ask that really important question. What comes after you're just trying to survive?
Okay, first up, the mind's emergency switch. At its absolute core, this is a coping mechanism. See, when your nervous system is just flooded with stress, your mind needs a way to handle what feels unhandleable. And that's where this switch comes in.
So, let's get our terms straight. What is psychological detachment, really? It's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot, but in the world of psychology, it has a very, very specific meaning.
And listen, it's really important to be clear here. We are not just talking about daydreaming during a boring meeting or, getting lost in thought. This is a much deeper, much more profound psychological process that our minds use to cope when they're pushed to the absolute limit.
So here it is. Psychological detachment is the mind's way of disconnecting from its own inner world. We're talking about your thoughts, your emotions, even your memories, or your sense of who you are. The crucial thing here is that it's a defense mechanism. It's designed purely to create some distance from a reality that's just too painful or too threatening to deal with head-on.
And that brings us to a really critical question. What kinds of experiences are so intense that the mind's only option is to flip this switch and just check out? Let's take a look at the common triggers.
What's so fascinating here is the sheer range of triggers. It's not just about a single terrifying event, like an accident, what psychologists call acute trauma. It can also be a slow burn. Think about the relentless pressure of chronic stress, whether it's from a high-pressure job or a difficult situation at home. That can wear down our defenses just as much. The common thread in all of this is that the emotional pain becomes so overwhelming, the mind is basically forced to create distance as a last resort.
Okay, so we've talked about the why, but what does detachment actually feel like from the inside? How does it show up? Let's try to make this abstract idea a lot more concrete.
I think this quote just captures the feeling perfectly. There's this sense of unreality, a muting of everything. The world keeps moving around you, but you feel like you're separated from it all by an invisible wall of glass. You are physically there, but mentally and emotionally, you are somewhere else entirely.
And that feeling actually has clinical names. It often starts with emotional numbness, like the volume knob on all your feelings has been turned all the way down. Then you've got depersonalization, which is that super eerie sense that you're watching your life from the outside, almost like it's a movie. And that often comes with derealization, where the world itself feels foggy or distorted or just plain fake. And when your mind is that disconnected, it's really no surprise that it can also lead to gaps in your memory because you weren't fully online to record what was happening in the first place.
So now we get to the central paradox of detachment. It's a brilliant survival tool, it really is, but it's one that comes with a very high price. It can be both a protective shield and an isolating cage. See, on one hand, it's a shield. In a crisis, it lets you function. It dials down the fear so you can do what needs to be done. It's an absolutely essential short-term escape from unbearable pain. But if you stay there too long, it becomes a cage. You can't connect with others, you can't process the very trauma you're trying to escape, and over time that shield creates this profound and hollow sense of emptiness.
So if this is a temporary survival mechanism, it kind of begs the question, how do you move beyond it? What happens after the danger has passed, but your mind is still stuck in survival mode? If there's one thing to take away from all of this, it's this. Detachment is an incredible tool the mind uses to get through the unthinkable. It's like a temporary shelter in a storm, but it was never ever designed to be a permanent home.
True healing is about the journey of learning how to step out of that shelter, often with help and support, to slowly and safely reconnect with your feelings, your body, and the world again.
And that really leaves us with a final crucial question to think about. If detachment is the armor we put on to face a threat, well, the real journey begins when we try to figure out how to slowly and very carefully take that armor off. How do we learn to feel safe in our own skin and in the world without it?